Hey everybody, Nate here. Just wanted to provide a little bit more detail on one of the charts that we covered while we were doing our charts webinar a little while back. So if you haven't seen the charts webinar, make sure to check that out. This is going to get a little bit more detail on one of the charts in particular that typically has some questions asked around it, and maybe I can help clear some of those questions up before you ask them. So the chart that we're going to be looking at here is the campaign progress chart. So the general, it's the one in the top right corner here that I'm highlighting. So the general purpose of this chart is to look at your current campaign and compare it to the prior X amount of years. I have it set up to show 3 years. So compare current campaign year versus those prior two. And it's really looking at is this campaign bringing in more money, less money, or about the same money as the last year or the last 2 years or whatever. I think it does up to 10 years. So that's kind of the purpose of this chart. So before we start looking at any of the options here, I'm going to switch over. I made this chart much larger just so it's a little bit easier to see. So you should be able to see that we've got 3 bars here. So the third one's very hard to see in most cases just because I kind of have bad data in my database. But if we look at this number 8 here, we can see there's a little tiny red bar here for the bar chart, and it has 27,978 above it. And if I hover over that, that's my current campaign. So it's red because it is below the prior year. It's not going to be this dark blue like the key tells us, but that's because it is lower than the previous year. So that's comparing what I've got in this year versus last year. So obviously 27,000 is a lot less than the 1.6 million that I've got in the prior year. So if we look at the 12th little frequency here, it's a green bar. And if I hover over it, you can see that's 4.7 million. And again, it says it's current year, and it's green because there's nothing to report for campaign year 2018. So it's green because it's more than what it was in the prior year. So if I had better data, I think this would look a lot better. When you put this app in and configure it properly, I think you'll probably get better data than what I've got in my test system. So that's one of the things I think people are, they look at this key and they see this third series here and they don't realize, they kind of think they're expecting something dark blue, but really this the most recent, the current campaign year, it's typically going to either be red or green because it's either above or below the final raised for the prior year. So that's one of the first pieces of confusion that I wanted to try and clear up there. I've been calling these numbers across the bottom frequencies, and there's a reason for that. They're not necessarily months or days or weeks. I have it configured to be kind of months. We'll talk about why I say kind of. But where those come from is this interval. So what I've done is I've set up my campaign year to be a full 365 days. You can do, if your campaign runs 6 months, you can set it up to be 6 months. If it runs 9 months, you can set it up to be 9 months. So whatever you decide that your campaign year is for your organization, you can configure that. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. But just for now, I've got it set up to be 365 days. I'm telling this app to break those 365 days up into 30-day intervals. So this interval in days is basically saying, take the 365, divide it by this total, and that's how we get 12 across the bottom of this chart in the x-axis. So 365 days divided by 30 intervals, days, gives me 12. And that roughly breaks down to months. It's not going to be perfect. There's going to be some overlap, but that's kind of how this is calculating. So it's not breaking it down specifically by month. It's breaking it down by days in this case. Okay, so that's the other setting here that I really wanted to talk a little bit about. This interval is what determines the frequencies across your x-axis. Now, the one piece that's missing here is we don't have anywhere on screen right now where you can configure when your campaign starts and when your campaign ends. In the United Way world, we know we've got campaign years, we've got fiscal years, we've got calendar years. almost never do those three completely overlap. So we have to have a place to configure your finance, your financial fiscal year. That's in system preferences. And we also need a place to configure your campaign year, which again is a lot of times different than your fiscal year. So the way that we do that is we put that date specifically on your campaign account. So what I've done is I've looked up my local campaign account. You can tell it's the combined campaign attribute here. So I've looked up my local campaign account, which is what I have the chart configured to. And if I go to the campaign tab and the campaign dates sub-tab, you'll notice that there are dates in here. You may not have these dates, and that's perfectly okay, but that also may explain why this chart doesn't look right to you. What this chart is doing is it's basically saying my campaign that I have dictated to it starts on July 1st and it ends on July 1st the next year. So for 2017, I've got July 1st of 2017 is the start date, and my campaign year goes all the way to July 1st of 2018, full 365 days. This is where if you've got a different setting, then you can configure this however you want. But what this does is it works in combination with that 30-day interval that we just talked about to kind of lay these frequencies out. So for example, knowing that my campaign year starts on July 1st, this number 1 frequency down here says that with that 30-day configuration, interval number 1 or frequency number 1 is July 1st to July 31st, right? It's the first plus 30 days. The second interval would be July 1st plus 60 days. The third interval would be July 1st plus 90 days, and so on, 120, 150, whatever. So it's not really, January. 1 is not January. 1 is the first 30 days from this date. 2 is 60 days from this date. So that's kind of how those frequencies get tracked and they get broken up. So everybody's campaign year typically starts a little bit differently. We have to allow for that flexibility. And this really shows you that if you're, in my case, my campaign year is July to July next year, this is essentially July, August, September, October, November, December, and then it falls off, right? So in my case, it starts at July, but if your campaign year starts in April, then the first frequency that you choose would be April. So to kind of summarize all of this, there's 2 pieces of configuration that you need for this. One is what we're looking at right now is the start and end date on your campaign account. And then the other is the setting in your dashboard app, and that's for your intervals. Those 2 pieces of data work together. That's what forms the x-axis down here. And again, you've got 30 days from the campaign start date, 60 days from the campaign start date, 90 days, and on. So that's also why we don't put labels down there, because it gets a little crazy when we're trying to do all that kind of dynamic stuff, and it would have to be pretty complex coding based on what some folks want to see out of this app. So hopefully that explains this a little bit better. I think this is a really cool dashboard app. It's really, really nice. I wish I would have known about it a long, long time ago. Maybe it didn't exist when I was at my United Ways, but I think this is a really good app for displaying some data without having to run a report. At a quick and easy glance, you can see how am I doing currently compared to the last 2 or 3 years. Again, I think this handles up to 10 years. So if you really wanted to get that deep dive, you could see how are we comparing this year versus the last 10 years and kind of unlock some hidden trends in your data without having to do any complex reporting or anything in Excel or anything like that. So again, hopefully this helped clarify this guy a little bit. If you have any questions, you can always submit a support ticket to our help desk, and they will absolutely answer anything that they can answer for you. They can do a fantastic job with what they can do. So shoot a support ticket over if you have any additional questions. But again, hopefully this cleared things up a little bit for you, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, everybody.